Hi everyone, welcome to Standards Map. Over the course of this video, I will be showcasing the main features of the application. So before we start, I would invite you to check out the video on the intro page that actually sets the scene. It will tell you a little bit about voluntary sustainability standards, what they are, how different they may be from actual mandatory regulations, and you will also have the opportunity to review some of the main features of the application, namely the identify, the quick scan, the compare, and the self-assess modules. So if you want to enter Standards Map, you can actually do this in two ways. You can actually click on the Take a Tour, in which case you will be guided towards the first module of the application, Identify. You will then be able to run a quick analysis, move on to quick scan, but you will not be able to actually move into the compare and self-assess modules because at that stage you will actually need a login. So let me go back to the home page. So that's one way to do it, right? If you just want to identify those standards that might be specific to your product, your producing, processing country, and if you want to review those quickly. If you want to have the full analysis made available with Standards Map, in that case, you actually have to register. And registration takes about 2 minutes and it's free of charge. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to enter with my own credentials. Those credentials are, by the way, also valid for the other ITC market analysis tools. And I'm going to click on Login. So now I'm back to my Identify page. So this is really the starting point of the Standards Map. You first have to identify those voluntary sustainability standards which you want to either quick scan, compare, or run a self-assessment against. Right now in the database, as you can see, we have 132 standards which are made available. What you can do is actually browse through the list, select the ones which may be of interest. If you know that there are specific ones which you want to review, you can manually pick them, as I'm doing right now. Or alternatively, what you may want to do is actually refine, narrow down the list. So you can do this in several ways. You can actually do this based on a product, producing country, or destination market, because those 132 standards that are made available may not pertain to all products or countries. So in order to select and to refine the list based on a given product or service, you can actually enter the name of the product. And right now I'm typing coffee. Coffee pops up in the drop down. I click on it, and as I do this, the list of standards gets refined. That means from the 132 standards, I'm back to 38. What you can also do is make use of the producing country. So what I'm going to do right now is that I'm going to review which of these voluntary sustainability standards actually cover the production or processing of coffee in a specific market. So let me select Colombia, and now I'm down to 24 standards. The final thing which I can do also is review which of these 24 standards may actually be retailed in a given destination market. So now if I select Switzerland, I'm down to 21 standards. I can further refine this list by clicking on the More option, and let's say I want to review which of these 21 standards may be specific on a given social hotspot. Let's say child labor. I can select child labor, and I can see that I'm down to 18 standards. The next step which you can take is to then select the standards of interest. So I'm just going to select 4C, BioSwiss, let's say Fair Trade, and Rainforest Alliance for the purpose of this presentation. You can select as many standards as you like, but as you will see on the quick scan and compare, only information is returned for 4 standards at a time, but you can still access additional standards along the way. You know what? I'm actually going to select a 5th one to showcase this feature. So now that I've selected those standards of interest, I can then go to the quick scan, the compare, or the self-assess. it's up to you. You can directly jump to the self-assessment module or to the compare one or the quick scan. The analysis is not linear. We do recommend, though, that you first start by checking out the quick scan, go into compare, and self-assess if you wish. So I'm going to click on quick scan, and I'm going to access the second module of the application. And what quick scan does is that it really much gives you an A to Z overview of the standards you have selected. So if I check out the criteria box, well, that's the analysis I was running, right? I had selected my coffee, the producing country was Switzerland. That's good. If I want to edit the scenario, any of this information, and rerun an identification of standards, well, in that case, I can click on edit scenario. Under the standards bar here, you can review the four of the 5 standards I had selected, right? And if I click on the different logos of these initiatives, you can see the information on the main page being updated. If I want to access the 5th standard I had selected, I need to unselect one of the 4 and select the additional one, update the list, and the page will refresh, and I will be back with 4 standards being displayed. So now let's move on to the main concrete elements of the page, right? But prior to doing so, I just want to show you these guided tool, view tutorial, and partners information buttons. The guided tool will give you some information about the different elements on the page. So you will have a little title and a little description. You can continue the tour by clicking on the little arrows, and you can also end the tour at any moment on time by clicking on the end tour button. You also have the view tutorial, which are short videos that last about 2 minutes and which showcase the main features of each of the modules. And then finally, you've got partners information that provides links to some of our main partners on the ground. So, back to the main information on the page. So first you have the quick scan tab, and that gives you information on different elements of the standards you have selected. You can have a quick overview of the initiative, such as short description, the key features, some facts and figures. You can review the scope of the initiative, that is, in which countries does it actually operate, what are the products that are being certified, the main target groups, the interoperability of initiatives, that is to say whether there is any kind of alliances, with different standards out there, the assurance process, when it comes down to actually carrying out the audits, how do they take place, what's the different elements that need to be taken into consideration, the different claims and labeling and chain of custody of the different standards, the support that might be provided by the standard organization, the costs which may be incurred during the certification process, together with a step-by-step guide as to how to become certified, a quick overview of the sustainability hotspots, and information about the contact details. So that's the type of information you can get on the quick scan. Now there is also a second part to this page, which is the hotspots section, as I'm outlining now. If I click on the hotspots, I will then access some graphs, right? And what these graphs will do is that they will showcase the different environmental, social, economic, quality, and ethics related requirements of each of these initiatives. If I click on the different systems, as I'm doing right now, you can see that those charts will actually get refreshed. So how did we actually generate those charts? Well, first of all, the main purpose of the standards map, being a UN database is not to provide any value judgment on any of these initiatives. So we try to find a system which is as neutral as possible. So let's take a look at the first two charts, the hotspots breakdown and the hotspots requirement. The hotspots requirements looks at the number of requirements of this given standard system. Fair Trade International, it's Small Producers Organization standard. The number of requirements that fall under environment, social, economic, quality management, ethics, and integrity. I can see that there are 53 requirements which may be captured under environment, 52 under social, 12 under economic and management, 17 under quality management system, and 5 under ethics and integrity. In order to actually come up with those numbers, what we have done is that we have a full set of requirements. All in all, we have we collect information against 370 such requirements. Most of the requirements that we have in our kind of data schema, if you like, are found under environment, social, and economic. We have fewer requirements on which we actually collect against under quality and ethics. So it's really important to know this, because it doesn't mean that if we have 53 requirements under environmental, only 5 on ethics and integrity, that this standard focuses 10 times more on environment than ethics and integrity. If you like, these kind of requirements are part of a checklist, right? It's elements which you need to make sure that you actually encompass within your production unit in order to potentially become certified. So the hotspot requirements really gives you the number of requirements per hotspot area as referenced in the Standards Map database, as outlined in the little footnote beneath the first graph. Now, if I go to the hotspots breakdown, it's exactly the same information, but shared in relative terms, right? So those 53 requirements that we had identified under environment amount to approximately 38% of all of the requirements which fall under Fair Trade International SPO. Social, which had 52 requirements, amounts to approximately 37%. So these two charts are very much complementary. Then there is the third one, which is the degree of obligation. We are also looking at absolute numbers, right? So the number of requirements which may fall under a specific degree of obligation or time frame. And here, as you can see in the graph, in the legend, we actually have 5 different categories. We've got for immediate action within 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, or just mere recommendations. And these degree of obligation are very important because they showcase how quickly the requirements which are being reviewed need to be implemented. If some of these requirements are for, let's say, immediate action, this means that upon the first audit, all of these requirements need to be implemented. Now, this is the first part of the page. It gives you some kind of overview. Now, let me scroll down a bit. All of the graphical information is also being supplemented by these tables. It's extremely important that you review not only the graphs that are being displayed at the top, but that you also take a lot of notice of what is happening in the table. So as you can see, the table is also dynamic. So we've got all of the different criteria which may fall under the different sustainability hotspot. If I click on the social, I've got subcategories, and I can review all of the different requirements falling under this human rights and local communities, which are being required by Fair Trade International SPO standard. So you've got first the name of the criteria, so let's say promotion, enhancement of education. You've got the degree of obligation or time frame under which this given requirement needs to be implemented, and you have the description which is taken from the Fair Trade standard itself, which is being provided here. If I click on the more information, I will have a pop-up that will come on the screen, and I will have information as to from which reference document this extract was taken, together with the localization of the details. So this is the analysis of the hotspot section, but you can also dig deeper, right, by clicking on environment here. Let's say you get the page which is being refreshed for you with a new set of charts that are being created. If I go back to hotspots, the charts that you just saw right now are just this share of the hotspots breakdown, which are being outlined with the specifics of it, right? And it's exactly the same type of charts and information as what was portrayed in the previous section, except that here we will only be focusing on the environmental parts: social, forest, chemicals, biodiversity, etc., etc. You also have a filter which is made available if, let's say, you only want to review those criteria which may be for immediate action. So those that have to be implemented up front. So following the review of the given standards, you can review the different ones in turn. You can actually jump to the compare module. And to do so, you just click on compare. The page gets refreshed and you can see that something is loading up with those little icons on the page. And what happens now is that rather than having information being returned for one standard at a time, under this compare module, what we're doing is that we're looking at the 4 initiatives all at once. The chart's hotspots per sustainability area and degree of obligation are the same as the ones that were provided on the quick scan, only difference being that rather than reviewing information for one standard, you're reviewing information for 4 standards. The hotspots per standard, the spider charts, are actually a bit different. Now, you get information as to the number of requirements, right, for each of these initiatives along the main sustainability hotspots. As you can see right now, the information is a bit blurry, right? We're looking at 4 standards at the same time, which gives me the opportunity to say that all of these charts are dynamic, right? You can actually play with the legends, modify the information which you may be reviewing along the way, as I'm doing right now. You can see that I'm clicking on the legends and automatically the charts are updated. Or you can also say, select the type of visualization which you would like to see on the screen. So the system really has quite a lot of graph types, and some people prefer web spiders, others polar charts, so feel free to play around with this information. So just as under the quick scan, the information is first being displayed in different graphical terms, and then if I move down, you have the same information as before, but there again, it's 4 standards at the same time. And what this chart does is, at a glance, you can actually review which of the given criteria, which may be displayed on the left-hand side, are covered by some initiatives, but not others. So this is, if you like, the 30,000 feet view, of an actual standard system. What's important, though, is to dig deeper. So soil erosion, if I click on this, I will then see whether or not the requirement is covered. I can then see the associated time frame. So as you can see on the chart right now, it looks like Rainforest Alliance may impose a given requirement on soil conservation erosion, which needs to be implemented within 1 year, whereas Fair Trade International requires this to be implemented within 3 years, and Forestry Association within 5 years. You also have information on the threshold. The threshold basically comes down to asking whether or not this specific requirement is measured or not, whether there's an actual kind of measuring that takes place in order to showcase when the audit takes place that soil conservation erosion is indeed taking place, and the producer has actually measured on the ground that this requirement has been covered. Just as before, you also have the text extracts that are being returned from the various standard documents. So you can look at this information for the main hotspots. You will see that you will also get some new charts that get generated on the environmental, social, economic, quality, and ethics. One of the features of the application is the reorder and set reference. Right now, we've got 4C, BioSwiss, Fairtrade International, SPO, and Rainforest Alliance that are being returned. As you can probably imagine, those are being returned in alphabetical order. But let's say you wanted to have Rainforest Alliance come first in your column to really be your reference, and in order to make sure that the filters are actually run against the first standard in the first column, you can actually modify this order. So I can click on reorder, set reference. So you have a little pop-up on the screen. You click on Rainforest Alliance, you drag it and you drop it in first position. You click on update and the page will update. And there again, as I will scroll down the page, I will see that in the table, Rainforest Alliance will come first. And the same also applies for the various charts. And there we go. So just to be clear, the reason why you would do something like this is that the filters that are made available only filter against the first column. That is to say, if I look for immediate action, I would only be looking at those Rainforest Alliance criteria which are for immediate action. It will not be looking at the ones that are for implementation within 1 year, 3 years, 5 years recommendation for Rainforest Alliance. Only for immediate action for the first standard in the first column. An additional feature of this page is the actual setting reference. So what you can do here is, let's say you select Fairtrade International SPO and you make it as your reference point. If you want, this can also be interpreted as saying, listen, Fairtrade International is my goal. This is where I want to be. Okay, this is my fixed reference. And what the system will do is that it will set Fairtrade International SPO as your 100%. So it will take all of the different environmental, social, economic, quality, ethics requirements of Fairtrade SPO and set them as the 100% kind of outscale. Okay, and what the system will do is that on a per criteria basis, it will review how many, or actually what is the percentage of those Fairtrade SPO criteria which are also being covered by the Rainforest Alliance, the 4C, and the BioSwiss. And this information is being returned in this first chart. Okay, the two other charts, the hotspot per sustainability area and degree of obligation, have not changed. It's just the first chart which has. And what's really important to note is that it's only the requirements of the Fairtrade International SPO which are being considered. Okay, so that means that maybe Fairtrade International, might be scoring 100% on environmental, and Rainforest Alliance might be scoring 88. But if you take a look at the hotspot per sustainability area, the chart which hasn't been modified, which doesn't have a fixed reference, you can still see that Rainforest Alliance actually requires 75 requirements on pertaining to environment, whereas Fairtrade SPO has 53. That basically means that the requirements that are being required by Fairtrade International might not match exactly the ones that are being required by Rainforest Alliance. So This is also a very handy chart because you might realize that to jump from one certification to another, or in order to be certified by two initiatives, you might only need, to actually modify your production practices a little bit. That being said, what you really need to do, of course, is actually make use of the table at the bottom of the page to make sure of the actual matching of the requirements. So if I take a look at soil, I can see that the time frame for Fairtrade International seems to be 3 years. For Rainforest Alliance, it's 1 year. And of course, you have to look at the textual extract, right, to see whether or not the requirement matches when it comes to the written form of it. You can take a look at this information with a fixed reference also per sustainability hotspot. So let's say looking at environmental, social aspects, etc., etc. You can at any moment in time also clear the reference by clicking on clear reference in order to get back to your initial analysis. This is the end of the first part video. Please click on the second part video in order to review the self-assessment process.